everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Heidi from My Reading Life, and I'm here today to film my review video for the Book Naturalist Book Club's pick for the month of March. In March, we were reading fiction, and we read The Vaster Wilds by Lauren Groff. Lauren Groff is a well-known literary fiction writer. I don't know how many novels she has written in total, but I know she has one called, I think, Fates and Furies, and another one called Matrix. And so she's had several novels out, much acclaim for her writing. I have never read a Lauren Groff book before. So I was excited that we had picked one of her books for the Book Naturalist Book Club for this year, because it was good for me to be able to try her writing. So this book is sort of a cross between historical fiction and, I would say, like a fairy tale, fantastical parable type of a deal. So we're following a young girl, a teenage girl, who escapes from a settlement in America in the early part of the colonial period. So pre the formation of the actual United States, a group of European colonists have settled in this unnamed place in the colonies, and she escapes from their settlement in the middle of the winter, carrying a few things, but escapes into the wilderness. And this is the story of her flight through the wilderness. So it's historical fiction in that way. Where it deviates from that is there are a lot of fantastical elements in this, and it really is sort of a parable or a cautionary tale about how humans use the environment. It's talking about colonialism and the harmful impacts of colonialism, and it's also talking about how humans have used the earth to our own detriment, and that if we continue basically to use the earth without any thoughts to what that's doing overall to the system, it's not going to go well. And so you get this this is a book of, what I would say, this is a book of ideas rather than a book of plot. There isn't really a plot. This young girl is running away from this colony, this settlement in the colonies, and we're following her flight. But there is no greater plot than that. So if you're looking for a plot, this is not the book for you. It's also not a character book, because the only character is this young girl, and you don't really, she is a vessel for the ideas of the book more than she is a character on her own right. This isn't about her character development at all. It's about her ruminations on religion, on nature, on humankind and human nature, and there's a lot of feminist themes in here because, of course, she's flashing back as she's running through the wilderness, as she's traveling through the wilderness. She's having flashbacks and remembering previous times in her life and what has happened to her over the course of her life. She has not had an easy life at all, and that's the other thing I would say about this book is there's any bad thing that can happen to a woman, particularly in this time period of like 1600s, 1700s, happens to this young woman. So, go into this knowing that you're going to have to read about some terrible things. Also, there's violence. There's violence to animals. There's violence to animals. I'm not going to caveat that at all. So if you don't like violence to animals in your books, I would say beware of this one. So I would say, I don't want to say that I dislike this book. What I want to say is that it's not a book for me particularly. I am the kind of person that finds it hard. I went into this expecting historical fiction. So historical fiction, while it's fiction, is still based on like true things, right? History, actual events in the world. And so I went into this expecting this to be true to events that happened in that time period. And it is in some ways, but then it deviates from that. And there's a lot of like things in here that my very practical nature just could not accept. Like, I read fantasy and I'm fine with fantasy. I read romance and I'm fine with the storylines in romance because I read them as fantasy. I don't read them as things that happen in real life. So in reading this book, this young girl fleeing a settlement into the wilderness, she is a young woman that has been raised in a city environment. She has been a servant to a wealthy household. The things that this young woman did to survive, I did not believe that she would know how to do, nor did I believe she would figure it out on her own. Also, she flees in the wintertime with very little clothing. She does have fire. I don't want to get into too many details, but let's just say I could not believe that she would survive in the wilderness at her age with what materials she had to hand and her knowledge base of how to survive in the wilderness. So I found it very difficult to keep reading this book the more and more fantastical it became, or at least in my opinion, it became more and more fantastical because I wasn't reading it as a fantasy. So that part I had a really hard time with. I really struggled with. The writing is beautiful. The ideas, 100% on board with. So if you are a person who likes a quiet book, if you like a book that is really more about ideas than plot or characterization, I think this is a book for you. If you're a person that is like nature writing, which is why we're here, right? This is the Book Naturalist Book Club. This has very beautiful nature writing. So let's get into the beautiful nature writing because I have a couple of examples picked out that I thought were really, really well done. At one point she's on the run and she experiences an ice storm. We've had a lot of ice storms in my state over the past few months. In fact, we just had one last weekend and it was pretty amazing to see, a half an inch of ice collected on trees. It's absolutely stunning. It's very harmful, but it's absolutely stunning. So this is a description of what she sees after the ice storm. She knocked at the ice curtain with the back of her hatchet until it loosed, and then she pushed it open to an astonishment of the world. The whole forest was glistening silver in the night. After the hail, there had been freezing rain, all of which she had missed in the depth of sleep, and the freezing rain had been halted from pouring into her little declivity by the mounds of rotted dugout tree that she had instinctively pushed out to block the opening of her little cave. All the trees wore coats of ice so thick that they seemed glazed over with glass, and the stars shone so bright upon the world that the world shone back at the stars in stupid dazzlement. That is lovely. That is a lovely image of what it looks like after an ice storm. So I like that. The writing is just, I can't complain about the writing. The writing is very well done. And this is another segment that I thought it really spoke to me, and the ideas that are contained within this I think are really important. So let's read this little section. But the next morning she felt far better, now able to stand freely. Her feet had been bared, warmed by the fire, and the wounds had tightened and stopped their bleeding. She opened her eyes and lay in her comfort for some time. She saw the redbirds that flicked through the sun and shadow of the woods. She saw the way the tiny translucent green leaves just emerging changed the quality of light as it filtered on the forest floor so that it seemed to be seething there, strangely golden red. She wondered why the forest was so clear now, why she could see the beautiful rise of old trees all the way up and down the hills, and why there was no bramble or brush to grab at her or tear holes in her clothing, but she could not find an answer. For nothing in her ken would allow her to imagine that it was the Piscataway, the people of these parts, who so carefully burned the small brush away, and the saplings too, to better see their game through the trees. She did not know that many of the trees around her were hickory and chestnut and hazelnut and walnut, and that, should she dig below the leaf litter, she would find ample nuts to sustain her even in these hungry times after the winter and before the full bursting forth of spring. And that these trees too had been planted by the gardeners of this place, for her understanding of gardeners was limited to the ones of the city, and the ones of the city loved a straight line and a neat border, and looking out upon the trees seeming scattered there by the hand of nature itself, she did not recognize the human genius and planning in the wild abundance. So that segment is talking about how the Native Americans in the North American continent managed the woodlands and the fields and the forests for their own benefit. They didn't manage them in the same way that the Europeans did, and so it was not recognized as management. So that's on those people for not recognizing the actual genius of the way that the native peoples utilized their environment for their own benefit. This book has a lot of ideas like that in it that I think are very worthwhile and very much resonate with my own thinking about such things. But in terms of an overall story, what I'm looking for in fiction is, I like ideas, but I also either want really good characters or a really good story, or both, preferably. And I felt like at least a couple of those were lacking in this story. So that was The Vaster Wilds by Lauren Groff. For next month in April, because April is commonly the month where we read Australian novels or books, Australian books, I should say, not novels, for Aussie April, we have picked Understory, A Life with Trees by Inga Simpson. This is, in fact, nonfiction. Inga Simpson is, in fact, an Australian author, and this is her story about trees and how the author escapes from sort of an urban environment into a more rural environment, and how that impacts her understanding of nature, how she, interacts with trees, and how that experience illuminates her writing life and how it impacts her writing life. So I'm very much excited to start this one. I think this cover is absolutely stunningly gorgeous. I hope you will join us in April in reading Understory by Inga Simpson for the Book Naturalist Book Club. If you did end up reading The Vaster Wilds this month, please let me know in the comments down below and let me know what you thought of it. I'd be very interested to know that. And I hope that you will join us in the month of April with Understory. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you're all doing well and finding some good books to read.